Hello. I have a picture of the sea here because I was very much looking forward to coming to the conference, to flying, to spending a bit of time there. But unfortunately, that's not where we are at the moment. So I am pleased to be able to send a recording, but I thought I would start with a picture of the sea. So I'm going to talk about pandemic effects. I'm going to talk about the way in which the pandemic has been changing the way we think about certain things. Now, clearly we've come through an emergency, we've come through some very difficult times. I'm really thinking about a little bit over the horizon, what are we looking towards? And then I want to relate that to various of the ways in which collections are changing. Looking at collections in libraries which are integral to the way in which libraries have thought about things and the ways in which the relationship between the library and the collection is changing and how those changes are accelerated by some of these pandemic effects. So to start, 4 pandemic effects. Number 1, we've had a big shift online. And this is making us think about a more holistic library identity, a library identity that moves across physical and online manifestations, a single library identity. We've begun to think in a much more caring way. We've become careful. We have become deeply invested in thinking about equity. Empathy has become much more foregrounded as we have worked through various of the issues that have emerged and become visible this year, and notably the murder of George Floyd, creating a groundswell of reaction. Collections, but also libraries, all organizations are thinking about how they make what they have count, especially if budgets may be under question, if people are doing things in different ways. How do we optimize what we have? How do we think about the resources, the people, the spaces, all of those things in ways that optimize their effect in this changing circumstance? And finally, thinking about really aligning with community needs, institutional strategy, aligning with the needs of the organization of which the library is a part, whether that's a university or college, whether that's a community, a municipality, a city. Really thinking about the ways in which the library needs to support those changing goals of the organizations of which they are a part. Now, these are obviously all related. They are very important to think about together. So online, this is a picture of a library. It is a picture that tends to be used by the media when a library is needed. If you look at US News and World Report, if you look at various media, this library tends to be shown because in the popular imagination, libraries are places with wood and books in them. And despite all the changes that we've had over the last few years, a lot of the value and identity of the library is still bound up with the place and with the physical collection. What has happened with a big move online, we're really thinking about the library identity more holistically. We're thinking about the library identity less as a collection and a building, which libraries don't think about that way, but some users do. But thinking about the library as a holistic service, thinking about the library as expertise, thinking about the library as the way in which this organization and the people involved help people get things done, rather than the library as embedded and manifest in a building and a collection. So really thinking about bringing those together into that holistic library experience. And if you think about that, how do you begin to deliver more of the library experience online, and how do you mesh the online and the physical in new and different ways? So from a general point of view, a lot of thinking about how to deliver consultation and expertise online. Richer interaction and programming, if we think about public libraries and what they have been doing in terms of story times, in terms of book clubs, in terms of bringing people into that online environment in a much richer way. Thinking about reaching out into the flow of people's lives, into social media, into that network space. And I'll give an example in a moment, but really thinking about digitally augmenting things that currently happen in the physical environment. We've seen that move into the network with a variety of things, but also thinking about how to augment for the digital user. In an academic context, big priority, delivering efficiently into the learning environment, into the learning management system. Thinking about how to recreate the relational element upon which other services build, the relational element that allows you to develop research support services based on conversations, based on coming together and understanding what's required. And really thinking about the range of information services that go beyond the collection, how to deliver those in new ways. From a public point of view, that personal connection, how do you recreate that? Big focus on customer relationship management, profiling, thinking about how to support reaching out to users, to patrons, to readers in ways supported by systems. Increased digital offering, thinking about ebooks, audio, streaming, various learning materials, and then programming, as I mentioned a moment ago, thinking about how to deliver that programming in online environments. So really thinking about how to make that online experience richer, more engaging. This is an example of what I've called a digital augmented workflow. It's Map and Geospatial Hub. At Arizona State University, they've got this 3D Explorer. So this is a rendering of the map room. You can do a search. It shows you where the things are in the room. You can click on them, and then, if it's available digitally, it'll be shown. You can request it to be sent to you or digitized. So it's a way of trying to augment what previously might have been a physical experience with a digital element, a digital dimension. And if we think about public library services, this is the strategic statement of Denver Public Library, and they're really talking about reimagining service delivery models, growing the library's commitment to meeting people where they are. So people may be in the library, they may be at home, they may be in their workplace. Grow the library's commitment to meeting people where they are, because you want this holistic library experience under this access and enrichment goal. On the other side, just an example of the programming I was talking about, Baby Lap Time Live. It's from Columbus Metropolitan Library. Again, reaching out to meeting people where they are with those services that previously people might have come to the library for. And really a lot of imagination, a lot of engagement, a lot of rethinking of how to do this holistic library experience. This is the University of Michigan library website, which really is very comprehensive, very deep. I think it's really a nice example of how the library is pushing to create more of that full library experience online across a range of services. So moving from the sort of hybrid library website that we have now that points off in various directions to try and create a fuller library experience. Number two, aligned. Really focused on community needs, on institutional strategy. So this is Charlotte-Mecklenburg Library, and here they have a digital inclusion initiative, taking the CARES funding, the special COVID, the special pandemic funding, and providing laptops within their community to try and close that digital divide. But they're doing this, they are part of the Charlotte Digital Inclusion Alliance. They're part of a community group of players, of actors, of other organizations, all focused on trying to overcome that digital divide that has really been cruelly exposed by this pandemic. If you think about academic environments, again, big focus on learning. This is an interesting example. We've seen a renewed emphasis, a stronger emphasis on open educational materials, open educational resources to support distance learning, but also to support inclusion, to support bringing students in to reduce the burden of participation on students. So this has emerged as a very important institutional goal, which the libraries are supporting. Optimization. This is a newly opened library in Columbus, Ohio, where I am based. But if you think about optimizing, if you think about our use of space, we're really thinking about space now in very different ways. We no longer configure space around collections. We can configure space around experiences. And a lot of thinking going into how do we think about space and experiences in this post-pandemic environment where a public health layer is very important, where people may think differently about coming together in social environments. So this is really sort of a nice combination of open spaces, of the stacks, of learning spaces, but also bringing in light, bringing in original artworks, thinking about how to optimize that space for the types of experience that you want to provide. So optimize making strategic choices to meet particular goals. So reviewing the skills, the services, the priorities. Academic library examples we've already mentioned, optimizing for online learning, putting the library in the learning management system, digital materials, really looking at course materials, reading lists, course reserves, course lists, shaping library resources in a way that they can be readily consumed in that learning management system and that they're fit for purpose, that they are accessible. And optimizing for open. Big focus on open coming through the pandemic. I mentioned open educational resources, but also open access more generally, concern to provide open access materials. In a public library context, optimize for digital and optimize for engagement. Just examples, and I've mentioned these already. CARE. This is the annual report from Berkeley from a year or two ago, and I like this sentence saying this is a proclamation of our place at Berkeley and in the world. Every day, knowledge, compassion, and a spirit of patience and understanding flow from the library and throughout the arteries of this great institution. So this is a statement of the positive role that the library has in the institution, its role in mental health, its role in the social fabric, its role in helping the institution be a better place. And I think that role and the needs of that type of role have really become paramount. And thinking about library staff and thinking about library communities and thinking about how to be careful in a difficult time where a range of inequities have been exposed, where institutions and people and management and relationship with customers really displaying the need for care, for empathy, for support. Some examples, Toronto Public Library calling senior customers, people who may be lonely, who may be isolated, not necessarily with a library service, just to make that contact, to make that connection. These are people who may have come into the library who would welcome that connection, that human touch, that sense of there being a partner, a companion, somebody to talk to. On the left, a report from JISC and EDUCAUSE, JISC in the UK, EDUCAUSE in the US, looking at some pandemic effects. And one of the themes they highlight really is the mental health and well-being of both students and staff, and the need to take special care around wellness, around mental health, as people are struggling in their personal lives with the emotional fallout, with economic fallout, with a range of issues that have emerged over this year or this year and a half. I especially like this, and I've shown it a couple of times. This is Kieran Clark from the University of Sussex speaking at an RL UK, Research Libraries UK panel. It's on YouTube. So he's talking about social media and how they want to introduce a much stronger, empathetic, kind, supportive tone into their social media, so that libraries are educational spaces, but also spaces that provide care for communities, that this care for communities is really very important and a soft power, if you like, of libraries within the communities that they serve. So he talks about the fundamental importance of tone, shifting the tone so that the core is kindness. They've prioritized silliness. They've brought social justice to the foreground, shifted away from neutrality, staying true to institutional values and elevating them, what the institution stands for, and developed empathic care and support into our voice. So they are very purposefully, very planfully looking at changing the tone of that social media to provide that care, supportive environment. And I mentioned the reckoning, the recognition of racial inequity across our communities, across our libraries, across our collections, across our institutions, a global concern to examine and to reckon with the situation that has been exposed. So on the one side, Columbus Metropolitan Library again, facilitating from a programming point of view conversations about race, reaching out into the community. University of North Carolina has a set of initiatives which are really well worth looking at. The Reckoning Initiative at the University Library. So a commitment to go beyond a mere focus on diversity and inclusion, to use equity, inclusion, and social justice as a lens for all our work. And there's a range of examples of what they're doing, programs, ways in which they're looking at collections or descriptions or a variety of other things. 21-day Racial Equity Challenge, a syllabus focused on library and archives that helps library archival staff to think about these issues to challenge themselves. Okay, so that's a broad view of some pandemic effects. Now, I want to think about the way in which the relationship between libraries and institutions and collections, rather, has changed, and how those changes are accelerating in this environment. So if you think about collections in a long past, careful construction of a locally acquired collection. And that's still quite strong, and it's actually quite important, but it's how we tend to think about collections. However, what we now do is we optimally satisfy research and learning needs from a facilitated network of resources, from resources all around the place, not just from that locally curated collection. They may be local resources, but then they may be collaborative resources, open resources, commercial resources that we pull from various places. And now also the collective management of those collections as well underway. We have done this with licensed collections for some time. Now we're beginning to look at print collections and manage those print collections in collective and unified ways. So thinking about those three areas, plus what I call the inside-out collection, I'll come on to that in a moment, we've seen very clearly the rise of the collective collection, where increasingly we organize collections at a network or a system-wide level. Now, that organization may vary. It may just be resource sharing. It may be deeper, though. We're beginning to see shared storage. We're beginning to see shared print initiatives that actually manage print collections together in various ways. We're seeing the emergence, slowly but gradually, of more collaborative approaches to acquisition, to thinking about a library's collection in relation to various other collections. And this is going to continue. This shared management of that print collection is going to continue. One example that's really quite interesting, we did some work with the Big Ten, the BTAA. This is a large group of universities in the US. The Big Ten collectively, as universities, have more research income than the Ivy League and the University of California put together. These are powerhouse institutions, many of them large public institutions, Michigan, Penn State, Ohio, plus some private partners. But this is a major group of universities. Together, they curate about 25% of the titles, the print titles in the overall North American collection. They recently, based on some of the work that we've done, came out and committed to coordinate the stewardship of those print collections. They are going to manage their collections at the system-wide level moving forward. They are going to manage their collections together moving forward. This is really a significant statement by a major organization. The facilitated collection. So here, what the library is doing is assembling a coordinated mix of local, external, and collaborative services around user needs. So the move online accelerates this need to provide targeted, relevant resources wherever they are, or however you do it, not just by assembling a carefully curated collection here, but actually provide targeted, relevant resources in the best way possible in this environment which has moved online. And you can see a spectrum, over time. Then, once you had the acquired collection or the owned collection, now you have the facilitated collection. So people began to borrow from each other. Then there was a shared licensing. Now we're very much in an era where you have demand-driven, data-driven, evidence-driven collections where data behaviors are driving the way in which collections are assembled. At the same time, we have a variety of more collective approaches, collective collections, beginning to think about shared print, resource sharing networks, shared print networks, shared digital collection, aggregations of digital materials, bringing together digital materials because it makes more sense than seeing it in, from institution by institution. Shared scholarly outputs, looking at pulling together preprints, research data, and other things. These things are coming together in various ways. Behind all of this, what I call the external collection, pointing researchers like Google Scholar, including freely available ebooks in the catalog, providing access to open access and open educational resources, creating resource guides for web resources. If you think about resource guides, certainly in academic libraries, they're like this ivy that has now begun to cover all of these library websites. You've got all of these resource guides describing resources that are available, not necessarily acquired, but are available in the network for people to use. The Inside Out collection, this also has been accelerated in the pandemic environment. So if you think about collections as we understood them, they're really outside in. You license material and bring them in for your users. You buy material and bring them in for your users. However, what is also important are the resources that the institution is responsible for. For an academic institution, research materials, research data, special collections, public libraries, local history, community memories. These types of things that are institutional or community focused that you want to take and share with the rest of the world. These are the inside out collections because they come from your community. They come from your community and you share them within your community, but also share them with the rest of the world. We've seen really a speed up in how research has been done. We've seen people wanting to get results out quicker. We've seen more collaboration. We've seen more interdisciplinary research. The pandemic has really accelerated and shifted some of the ways in which we think about research, and that has meant that the types of support that academic libraries might want to provide locally has also shifted to thinking about more purposefully partnering with academics, departments, to curate, manage, and make more discoverable research data, software, methods, the range of things that are important within the institution, big focus on those. And if you think about what it is that is institutionally specific, I very much like this snapshot from a page at Purdue University, one of the Big Ten actually. So along the bottom line, there's a variety of scholarly inside-out collections. So there's a Journal of Undergraduate Research hosted at the institution. There's Purdue Archives, the digital archival collections. There's PUR, which is research data collections. And then there's Purdue ePubs, which is sort of like the institutional repository, open access collections. And then at the same time, across the top, you have a variety of other resources, institutionally specific, that they're sharing with the outside world. If you think about public libraries, a renewed interest in community and thinking about the memories, the imagination, the experiences of communities. At the top, an example of thinking about COVID. There's been a lot of interest in collecting experiences of this historic, if tragic, moment. Thinking about capturing some community memory of this time. And we've seen a lot of interest in that. At the same time, though, a focus on communities, history, what's local. At the bottom, Adirondack community, the Keene Valley Library, looking at residents, looking at experiences from Adirondack community. And what it says, you may not be able to read it, capturing, retaining, and communicating the stories of who we are. So an interest in thinking about the memory, imagination, experience of communities, of who we are, capturing, sharing, commemorating, memorializing, bringing that into the future in ways that it can be present again. Now, there are two areas that have become especially important in this context. One that I've mentioned more generally, optimizing, more data-driven, but then the other, pluralized, where we are realizing there's this reckoning in relation to collections that you have to respect the communities of interest in your community, that you have to remedy ways in which marginalized communities may have been overlooked or shunned. So a really big focus on thinking about collections and description from that point of view. So from an optimizing point of view, libraries have focused on building, managing, and sharing collections. Greater attention is now turning to optimizing those collections locally and across groups. As a way of characterizing that, here is a list from Penn State, another Big Ten library, the University Library's collection priorities for 2021. And I just thought it was useful as a list of what people are actually looking at. So coursework and research. As I say, focus on coursework, focus on research, focus on what's important to the institution. Electronic resources in preference to print, less duplication. Review of resources usage, so more data-driven, more evidence-driven activity. Diversity of collections, what I was calling pluralization. Really, really big importance now. more negotiation. Consideration for collection space savings. People want to reconfigure space. Think about using space to configure around experience, not to configure around collections. Interdisciplinary research. And then major focus on open access. Now, if you think about this as a list, of course, there's trade-offs. You have to decide, if you focus on open access, it may mean you don't do something else. If you focus on buying up electronic resources for coursework, you may be able to focus less on the diversity of those collections. So it's balancing, trading off these things, but nevertheless thinking about optimizing what you do against priorities as they evolve. And we've certainly seen a greater desire to use data to drive this optimization, and a range of products and services, some from OCLC, emerging to help support that sort of data-driven optimization, help support, make decisions about collections based on usage, based on policies, based on consortial activity. Pluralizing. Libraries are pluralizing their collection services and perspectives so that all the communities that they serve recognize their own knowledges, their experiences, their voices, and their memories in library services. This means decentering dominant perspectives, and it means giving a voice and a name to all that they serve. So it's active, it involves remediation, it involves repair, it involves changing things, as well as taking a new focus and a new emphasis moving forward. This is an example from Goldsmiths in London, University of London. The university has an initiative called Liberate Our Degrees, which is looking at the composition of curricula, how they're delivered. And so this is a parallel initiative, Liberate Our Library. And what they are doing is working to diversify the collection, to decenter whiteness, to challenge non-inclusive structures in knowledge management and their impact on library collections, uses, and services. So they're doing this work to decolonize and diversify our collections, to ensure that library collections speak to all voices, particularly those that are traditionally underrepresented in curricula and on reading lists. So below this page, there are a variety of ways in which they are implementing this, the ways in which they are moving to decolonize and diversify their collections. And this has become a broad and general interest, and I think you'll begin to see as well services and support are merging to help libraries do this. Another example here from London, University of the Arts in London, an initiative looking at decolonizing reading lists. The Vancouver Public Libraries learning about Indigenous people in Canada. So certainly if you look at Canadian public libraries, and all Canadian libraries, because of the strong focus and imperative, federal imperative in recent years on reconciliation, big focus on thinking about collections and staffing and other things across the library spectrum in space, signage, in respect of elevating the voice and experience of Indigenous peoples in Canada has become a priority. Okay, so I spoke about 4 pandemic effects. Creating a more holistic view of the library, where the library is seen as a service and expertise. And maybe finally turning that corner where it's the library as a collection and a building is subsumed into that service and expertise, we'll see. Equity and empathy move to really center these as strategic goals. Make everything count, optimize, review, and commit. Two, focusing on what is important. Budgets are driving this, but so also is the recognition of changing circumstances, of unmet needs, of recalibrations of experience. And then aligning, really a sharp focus on the parent organization's mission and goals. Thinking about digital inclusion, thinking about supporting online learning, really thinking about how to make the library a valuable partner, a valuable collaborator with other agencies and organizations to advance the goals of those parent organizations. And one of the things that this emphasis is doing is really accelerating this new emphasis, this new relationship between libraries and their collections. And I've spoken about 5 areas really where I think that is important. So I will stop there and thank you very much and wish you well for the rest of your conference. Thank you all.